everyone, it's Hayes, and in today's video we're going to be evaluating whether or not for Miraculous, the show or the movie was better. Spoilers, it was the movie. Now before anyone in the comments is like, oh my god Hayes, what are you doing? You can't compare a TV show to a movie, are you crazy? Answer to the last one, yes I am. Answer to the first question though is also yes, you can if they're about the same thing in my opinion. For example, I wouldn't compare two things that weren't even about the same subject matter. For example, the TV show Bridgerton and the film Oppenheimer, because they're not even remotely similar. However, I do think it's fine to compare the film version of A Series of Unfortunate Events and the TV version of the same book adaptation. I think that's more than okay to do if they are about the exact same thing. And I do also largely think, this is just an opinion, but I do think I'm correct. I do also think a lot of people who are the ones that say this are usually the ones that prefer the show and don't want to admit that the film is actually better. And honestly, I'm not even convinced Thomas Astruc likes it. He did tweet this out after the movie came out and I can't find it anywhere, but I remember it pretty well. He was basically like, the show gives you what you need and the movie gives you what you want. I mean, he's not wrong. I really do want to watch something that's good. That's why I rewatch the movie all the time. Of course the movie isn't perfect, but I do think it did a lot of things right compared to the show. Although please remember that this is just my opinion, as it is in all of these videos, and it's totally fine if you disagree with me. I just ask that you disagree with me in a respectful way. And I'm not going to be comparing things like the animation, because we all know by now I don't know anything about it. Like always with my videos, we're going to focus on the writing of the show and of the movie, because that's all I am quite literally qualified to talk about. So we're going to start off with our protagonist, our main character, Marinette. So movie Marinette starts off super withdrawn. She only has one friend in school, which is Alia, but Marinette is very reluctant in this friendship. She doesn't think it's a good idea because she's just all over the place, but being Ladybug isn't something she wants to do at first either. But it does help her come out of her shell more and she gets more confident. As we see in school, she goes from destroying the science classroom to becoming amazing at gymnastics, and she really starts to feel a lot more sure of herself, both as Marinette and as Ladybug. The only area where she doesn't is around Adrien. Even though their small friend group in the movie is just the four of them, so her, Alia, Adrien and Nino, she's not all that comfortable around him despite her feelings for him, and while I wish she was, it does reflect her character and how nervous she gets. In my opinion, movie Marinette in under 2 hours has a really nice development. Is it groundbreaking? No, but she goes from a super shy girl who doesn't want to be at school to thriving at school because Ladybug has helped her to gain confidence. Apart from in one area, which is where Adrien is concerned, which seems to vanish once she finds out he's Cat Noir, which again makes sense because Cat Noir is the only boy her age we're shown she feels comfortable around in the movie. Now, as for the show, Marinette in Origins is like, I don't want to go to school because of Chloe, although not because she tried to drown her in the previous school year, just because she knows Chloe's going to be in her class again and she can't be bothered. She doesn't care about what happened in Derision. It's almost as if it was a retcon. Amazing. However, Marinette is completely defined, despite what we all know happened when she really shouldn't be, but that's Thomas Astruc's problem, not mine. And while she does have a confidence crisis during Origins when she doesn't do the Miraculous Ladybug at the end of the first part, Marinette really doesn't change that much. In Origins, despite Chloe, Marinette is really bubbly and bright, and with the exception of how she is towards Adrien, because she kind of hates him at first, as we'll remember, she is still really bubbly and bright to everyone, and while it reflects the normal girl with a normal life we're told about in the intro song, she has no real hurdle to get past, to develop past in her personal life, apart from that one confidence crisis she has, which she gets over really, really quickly and is never really looked back on again. You could argue that Adrien is a hurdle, but I think a lot of that is done for the sake of comic relief and not because they necessarily want her to develop past it. And that's really it. Once she has her wobble at the end of part 1 of Origins, she's fine. Even when Felix takes all the Miraculous in Strike Back, she's pretty fine in Evolution. She has a slight wobble in Multiplication, but then she's completely fine again after that. Realistically, Marinette should spend a lot of season 5 being worried she's making wrong decisions, especially since they only got the Rabbit Miraculous back and the rest of the Miraculous for like 2 or 3 months are lost. She doesn't know where they are. But she doesn't, she's totally fine. She doesn't really have any development to get over it. Cat Noir and Alia are just like, you got this, and she's like, yeah I do, let's go. So in my opinion, the development of Marinette in the movie is far better than what she gets in the show. And not only is it better in the movie, she also gets a lot more development in less than 2 hours in the movie compared to however much screen time she's had in the show. And now it's time for Banana Hair Boy, who is so insignificant he only gets a new pair of shoes for season 6. So, movie Adrien first though. I don't remember what I say in most of my videos because I've made over 1,000 of them. How I managed to finish and pass a PhD while yapping about Miraculous Ladybug this much is beyond me. I really don't know how I managed to do it. But after I got back from the premiere, I do remember in like my spoiler-free review of the film, I did say that the split between Adrien and Marinette in the movie was more even than it is in the show. It's definitely not 50-50, and honestly, I never expect it to be 50-50, but he definitely gets more screen time, more attention, more development in the movie compared to the show, and I definitely think a lot of people agree with me on that. Even if they don't like the movie that much, they definitely usually say that Adrien gets more attention than he does in the show. And another thing I loved about movie Adrien is that he is depressed.
I'm sorry, what?
Now, don't get me wrong, I don't usually congratulate people when they're super sad. However, I did like that Adrien was depressed. His mum is dead, they were super close. It makes sense he would be sad because, you know, his mum is dead. That's a normal emotion to feel when one of your parents dies. However, show Adrien never really gets sad about it. The only episode he really expresses sadness around it is in Godzilla, but to me in that episode I feel like he's more sad that he doesn't get to see the film rather than he misses his mum, but we could argue back and forth about that. And even in the episode Felix, he's pretty fine with it. He's more sad to me in that episode about his dad just being himself in that episode. Like, he should have some emotional reaction to seeing Amelie, his mum's identical twin, but after he goes, "Mom?" He's like, oh, he's completely fine. Like, he shouldn't be fine, but he never gets sad about it. So as a result, because they focused on like a depressed Adrien in the movie Adrien is far more withdrawn than show Adrien, to the point Adrien in the movie is still attending school, but he's doing his lessons alone in the library, and being Cat Noir becomes his escape from what has now become a really cold household. Adrien is withdrawn at the start of the film, but as it progresses during the movie, he becomes much happier. We see in his interactions with the friend group how much more open he is. For example, during the fair scenes, before the first big Akuma attack after the one at Notre Dame, we see just how open Adrien is becoming more so with Nino. And the only time he really backtracks in this development is when Ladybug rejects him at the end of Stronger Together, which is always better in French. Plus fort ensemble, yes, amazing. I don't understand who anyone prefers the English version of Stronger Together. It's, no, plus fort ensemble. So much better. And he withdraws into himself again, but not as much, and then eventually it seems like he stops being Cat Noir. It seems to be, in my opinion, implied in the film that after the defeat of Hawk Daddy that he and Ladybug stop transforming and stop meeting up because they're not needed anymore, and Adrien becomes sad again, showing that even though he and his dad presumably trying to fix their relationship, does Gabriel get sent to jail? I don't know. No idea. He realises he really misses Ladybug's support, but now she's gone and he has no way of contacting her because he doesn't know who she is. And then Marinette reveals herself to him. He starts crying because of how much she means to him. And I also really loved Adrien's relationship with his dad in the movie. They don't interact a great deal, they only have 2 scenes. So the first one is when Adrien comes home after the Stronger Together and shouts at his dad, and then right at the end after they defeat him they're having a hug on some debris in the middle of the Seine. However, the fact they only have 2 scenes together speaks volumes about how distant their relationship has become, and the state of it when Adrien shouts at his dad. There aren't many children I knew of growing up who would shout at their parents, but it shows just how bad their relationship has gotten and the respect Adrien has lost for his dad, but also the anger of still wanting to have a relationship, which he communicates in their last scene together in the movie. And all of this contributes really well to Adrien's development, where he begins as withdrawn and lonely, and while he gains some control and happiness back by being able to be free as Cat Noir, when Ladybug rejects him, he takes out how he feels on his dad, and then he and Gaby Baby decide to work together and grow as a family unit without Emily. I think it's wonderful, and honestly I also think it's better development than Marinette in the movie gets. And I love that, you know, in the movie they actually use the fact that, oh no, Cat Noir is the villain's son, which they just seem to ignore a lot of the time in the show. They're just like, No, that's not a plot point, forget it. No one needs to know. And speaking of the show, as I've said, Adrien always appears to be fine without his mum. He's never really sad about it. When it seems that actually show Adrien should be sadder than movie Adrien. Movie Adrien, when the film starts, he's already at school. It seems he's been going to school for a while. He's already friends with Nino when the film starts. After that first meeting with Marinette, he leaves the library and Nino is there. They're having a conversation. It implies they're friends, and it also implies that Adrien has been going to school far longer than he has been doing in the show, which when the show starts, that's his first day of school in Origins. That's his first day at any school ever. So show Adrien has been homeschooled. DuPont is his first school. And from what we know, if you're being homeschooled, I would assume, unless Emily was out all the time, that show Adrien was around his mum a lot more than film Adrien would have been, since film Adrien was going to school all the time. So really, show Adrien should be more upset than film Adrien, but he's completely fine, there's no problem. As for standing up to his dad, show Adrien never really does it, and while I'm aware Adrien's being controlled by an amok, I don't completely buy him just not being able to stand up to his dad. As far as we're aware, in terms of what was shown in the show, Adrien doesn't start getting controlled by his amok until episode 10 of season 4, Mega Leech. There are quite a lot of episodes before we get to Mega Leech. Episode 22 of that season, Ephemeral, was the 100th episode. So like, there were a lot of episodes before that, before the amok started getting used in Mega Leech to manipulate him, where Adrien could have stood up to his dad more. And Adrien's treatment by his dad was bad before Mega Leech. Like, of course it does get worse in season 5, but it was still terrible before. You know, like for example in the episodes like The Bubblet and Gorizilla, in the episode Ladybug when he was forcing him to be with Lila, but Adrien never stands up for himself, and we know he's more than capable of doing it, for example like in Representation. I would also use Risk as an example, but I feel that's a bit different due to the effects of Risk, since everyone was standing up and saying what they thought, so I'm not going to use that as an example here since it was under the influence of an Akuma. But Adrien never does, even though Representation shows he's more than capable of doing it. So while Adrien and Baby's relationship is just as bad in the show as it is in the movie, most of the time I don't really feel like Adrien cares about the relationship, when I just feel like it would be super important to him when one of his parents is gone. I know I say quite frequently I don't have a dad. Do I, strictly speaking, have a dad? Yeah, I have a biological dad, but he abandoned me and my brothers when we were all still children. When we talk about it at home, I don't call him my dad, I refer to him by his first name because he hasn't earned the title of dad. So because I don't have a parent, because he wants nothing to do with me because I don't know, my relationship with my mum is therefore really important. So you just, you know, if you lose a parent for whatever reason, I feel with the remaining parent, you'd want to try and have a relationship with them. And whilst Adrien does try in a couple of episodes, for example, in The Bubbler, he wants his dad to be there. In Santa Claus, he wants to celebrate Christmas with his dad. For the most part, he really doesn't try. He's just really resigned to it, and he's just like, okay, whatever, it's not going to change, not going to try, okay, fine. I'm not saying it's Adrien's fault, I know it's not his fault. The adult should be taking charge. However, I never get the feeling that Adrien cares that much. He's just like, yeah, my dad doesn't care. Oh well, I'll just go out and be Canoa. So it's not saying it's his fault and it's up to him to completely change it. However, he just never really seems to care that much about it. And Adrien's development in the show is really rather stagnant. He only really develops romantic feelings for people. And that's about it. Honestly, where Gaby Baby is concerned, I think they do a really great job in both the show and in the movie. Both have the same motivation of save Emily, but present him quite differently. Show Gaby Baby is cold and isolated, so he has time to defeat Ladybug and Cat Noir, and I think to him he kind of like justifies it in his mind. It doesn't matter if I ignore Adrien right now, because I believe I'm going to win this and I'll repair all the damage when I get my wife back. But then obviously in season 5 he starts to descend into badness and he's just set on defeating Ladybug because 14-year-old girls just really infuriate him. And then of course in Destruction he gets injured and he's running out of time, which makes him more desperate in season 5. Whereas movie Gaby Baby to me takes a bit of a different approach. While I've always loved Gabriel's motivation, like I've always thought it was solid, like I've said before, I've no idea what Lila wants. What is she gonna wish for? I don't know. Whatever it's gonna be, whatever her motivation is, needs to be amazing to be better than or just as good as Gabriel's, because Gabriel's was excellent motivation, amazing. However, compared to the show, movie Gabriel comes across to me as a much more sympathetic villain. In that scene where Adrien argues with him, he comes down the stairs, he's stumbling, struggling as he's walking, he's unshaven, he's tired, he's haggard. I do feel quite bad for him in that scene, despite all of the disaster he's brought onto Paris and how he's making his son feel. And because he loves his wife so much, he's willing to put himself through all of this in order to get her back. And while he's isolated himself from Adrien, I wouldn't really necessarily argue that movie Gabriel abuses Adrien. You could say he neglects him, but again, you could argue Natalie is taking care of Adrien, so therefore Adrien technically isn't being neglected. He's just not being taken care of by the person he'd prefer, whereas show Gabriel absolutely does emotionally abuse and neglect Adrien. And then we see at the end of the movie, Gabriel realise just how foolish he's been and how desperate he's been when he sees Adrien as Cat Noir, and he's genuinely sorry, in my opinion. And I don't mind him getting redeemed in the movie, because Gabriel in the movie just isn't as horrible, to be honest. Like I said, whilst he's got a solid motivation, I do see him as a more sympathetic villain, and whilst he has his evil moments, for example in his song towards the start of the movie, he kind of develops and sees like, oh, I've lost myself, I've lost my way, and I do genuinely feel that movie Gabriel could change and become a better person. Whereas, as I said just before, Gabriel is an actual abuser. If we take the amok out of the equation, what Gabriel does to Adrien would be classed as emotional abuse as well as coercive control and neglect. So I'm not okay with Gabriel being redeemed at the end of season 5. I know a lot of people like to argue that he wasn't redeemed. It's totally fine if you think he's not. However, I do think putting a statue of a child abuser in the park is a choice. So while I disagree with the redemption angle in the show for Gabriel, I do love how he developed in both the show and in the movie. And while I like the different approach they took to movie Gabriel, I definitely think we could have done with a few more scenes of him before the scene where Adrien shouts at him to show him descending into this desperation a little bit more. I definitely think that descent into madness we got in the show was executed much better than they did in the movie. So we've pretty much done like the main 3 characters from the movie, so let's move on to the other characters in the movie. And when I say characters, I really mean anyone with a speaking line, not characters we recognise and know the names of who are just running around in the background like in the school scenes. So in the movie, I hope I haven't missed anyone, we had Tom, Sabine, Chloe, Sabrina, Ali and Nino, Natalie, Master Fu, Tiki Plag, Nadia, the Magician, and a couple of other Akumas and a couple of one-liners like from the guards around Notre Dame right before the first ever Akuma attack in the movie. And that's it. There isn't really anyone else in the movie who talks. There are people around, but I mean someone who has an actual spoken line and is like a character who will be on the cast list. And that's something I really like about the movie. They've kept the cast small and succinct due to the shorter runtime compared to the show. They don't have time for Rose and Julika and Luca, but where was Mark, my son? How dare they leave him out from the background? I will be suing now. I love all the other characters, but when you know you don't have as much time to play with, you definitely should look at having a shorter cast. You wouldn't do a 10-minute short film with a cast of 20 people, you'd probably maybe do it with a maximum of 5. And while obviously they have more time in the show and they can have episodes where Julika features a lot, like in Reflector or Reflectol or Crocodule, and I'm sure you can think of examples for Nathaniel and Rose and Malene and whoever, they don't have that luxury in the movie, so I do like that they reduce the characters as much as I like everyone else. And honestly, for the show, I do actually think sometimes there are too many characters, especially for a kids show. And just some of them don't get to shine as much. For example, Alex, she is incredibly important, has like arguably one of the most powerful Miraculous, but she really doesn't get that much attention. I honestly do think a couple of them, you know, need to move schools, get out of town, move to Amiens, move to Lille, get out of the country. We don't need all of you. So now it is time for my favourite part, the love square. Although honestly in the movie it was more like love parallel lines because there was no Adrien and there was no Marinette, so it was only Adrienne and Lady Noir. So it's not a square, it was parallel lines. So let's start with movie Adrienne. And as you all know, I think by now, Adrienne is one of the reasons I watch the show. It's one of my favourite pairings. And I was a little disappointed in movie Adrienne. Don't get me wrong, I did love what we got. Their first meeting in the library was amazing, and every time I rewatch it I still can hear how loud the cinema at the premiere was. Like, not just at that scene, just at key moments during the film. I just hear, I can just hear people screaming. Don't get me wrong, I'm very lucky, I know I'm lucky, I'm very grateful. I got to go because I know so many other people wanted to go and couldn't get a ticket or they couldn't afford to get to Paris. Don't get me wrong, I understand I'm lucky, but sometimes when I rewatch the film, when I get to a certain point, I can just hear the screaming in my head. It was so loud in there. So the Adrianette scenes we have is they meet each other in the library, they talk together at the fair, we see them briefly in the montage, she asks him out, and then right at the end when they get together. And while all the key beats of a relationship are there, I feel like they just needed more screen time together. While I definitely believe movie Marinette fell for Adrien in the film, in that initial meeting in the library, I do kind of find it hard to believe her feelings for him remained and sustained until the end of the film, since they didn't really interact a great deal. However, I do love that when they did interact, it was really cute and innocent and guarded and sweet, which is what a lot of teenagers are like when it's their first love, their first relationship, especially for someone as nervous as Marinette. I know a lot of people definitely aren't a fan that Adrien in the film never seems to fall for Marinette, which is something I didn't really like either, but he kisses her at the end of the movie. Anyway. And I think this would have been solved basically by giving more scenes of Adrien and Marinette together and seeing how he cares about her, because I do generally think he cares about her as a friend, but if they could maybe try and develop it into something more, I don't know, maybe they have a funny scene with Nino and Ali has told Nino how Marinette feels about Adrien, maybe Nino could try and badly do something about it because it's Nino, and that would just develop into their relationship a bit more. So while it definitely needed more, I'm excited to see what happens with Adrianette specifically in the sequel, which may come out on the day of my funeral at this rate. Jeremy, I'm 28, I don't have as long to wait as everyone else, what if I die? Which I know is dramatic, but I didn't think any of you watched my videos for like a reasonable reaction to the show. And because Adrien and Marinette together and they have an identity reveal now, I'm also looking forward to seeing how their Ladybug and Cat Noir dynamic changes, because it's gonna have to change. And just as like a mini theory, I think for sure Cat Noir is going to be mega protective over Ladybug. He's lost his mum, Marinette means a lot to him. He won't want to lose her too, and they are actively putting themselves in danger. And the Miraculous suits in the movie don't seem as strong as they are in the show. They seem to get hurt a lot easier in the movie compared to in the show. And speaking of Lady Noir, I definitely feel like the Lady Noir in the movie was better than the Adrianette, and it was where most of the film's humour was. I love the dynamic of making fun of each other, which was established immediately in their first scene together in Notre Dame, and then they realise how much they need to work together, and one of my favourite scenes of them is on the rooftop practising their fighting, and they almost kiss. It was so amazing. So they slowly come together, but when she rejects him, I like how it kind of undoes some of their relationship development. And in the final battle, Cat Noir's like, okay, I'm just gonna go and defeat Hawk Daddy myself, and then he gets injured. I think backwards development like that can be really interesting to do, and it was really amazing here to see. And Lady Noir, despite being not my favourite from the show, like my favourite pairing, I think it was done basically perfectly in the movie. As for the show, I think Adrianette gets off to a great start, starting as kind of enemies in Origins and ending with the Umbrella Sea where she falls for him, chef's kiss perfection, and then it just kind of goes downhill from there. Marinette doesn't really get any closer to Adrien until Risk because of how clumsy and nervous she is, and it really does a disservice in developing their relationship. Like I said, until Risk, nothing really changes between them, and then Adrien decides he's in love with Marinette on the same day. I know it's multiplication when he realises, but it's the same day, I promise. I know, longer day, longest day ever. In fact, I don't know how any of them managed to go to school the day after, but it's the same day, okay? And his realisation is just super sudden, and in my opinion, I've been saying this for a while, in my opinion, Adrien fell for Marinette in Origins.
She's just a friend.
However, he didn't really understand his feelings, like how can I have feelings for two people, because he'd already fallen for Ladybug at that point. And then he just randomly wakes up in multiplication. He's like, oh my god, Marinette Dupenchang, let's go on a date. He never has a proper moment of realisation, of slowly realising like, oh yeah, she's the one. It just never really happens. It's just really disappointing to see. Like, that's the reason I watch the show, for them to get together. And when he finally realises how he feels about it, it was just a bit naff. So, sorry, I'm just playing with the cat. So I'm not going to compare Adrien and Marinette's relationship any further between the show and the movie, because as we know, in season 5, they get together and they only get together at the end of the movie. We don't see what their relationship together romantically is like in the movie. So I don't feel like it would be fair to compare them basically. Everything I've compared so far has an equivalent, so I just don't think it's fair to do. But I definitely think the build-up for Adrian in both needs some work, although I feel like the movie needs less than the show. I think like the movie might need 2 scenes to have fixed it. The show needs a lot more work, but to be fair, I am always worried about the show. As for show Lady Noir, I really enjoy it for the most part, and is something I didn't realise I like so much until we stopped getting it and all the flirting stopped. And while I definitely don't think they should be flirting with each other now, because obviously they're in a relationship together, not that they know that, I love their dynamic in the show for the most part. It doesn't really develop though, it just kind of starts. They're just like, oh my god, it's another crazy person dressed like an animal who's also come to attack a walking rock with me, let's be friends. And then they are done, you know, like there's nothing much else to it. Honestly, my favourite moments of Lady Noir between them is when there's some sort of conflict, like for example in Siren, like in Kuroneko, although I did hate that they made it about Ladybug not being in love with Cat Noir, and I was like, it's not because she doesn't return his feelings, it's because she's ignoring him for all the new heroes. Like, if I was Cat Noir, I'd be annoyed too. To me, conflict is when Lady Noir has the strongest writing, and I feel like the only missteps they've taken with it is how amazing they are together from the get, and also how pushy and creepy Cat Noir can be when he keeps bringing up how he feels. Like she knows. Everyone knows. The entire city is aware. Go for a nap, Adrien. So overall, I prefer both movie Lady Noir and Adrienette. Movie Lady Noir was perfect, and while movie Adrienette definitely needed more work and more attention to it, I like that Marinette's feelings and her anxiety around males, which me, hello, also me, I really like that they weren't made fun of in the movie. So now the plot and subplot. The overall plot of the show and movie is the same thing again, like with Gabriel's motivation. Stop Hawk Daddy from getting the Ladybug and Cat Noir Miraculous, which they did a great job of in the show. And the subplot of Miraculous to me is arguably Adrien and Marinette and Ladybug and Cat Noir and their relationship and if they'll get together or not. And other than how it ended with Gabriel in the show, I think the show does a great job of executing the overall plot, as in the very overarching plot beats, not all the little things that go into it. Until season 5, basically, I liked it. When Gabriel just became even more smooth-brained and never tries to access parallel universes again, like just wait 2 days after the Reverse special. It would have been fine, shouldn't have been there anymore, just do it. Not to mention Marinette never tries to work out who Monarch Daddy is. Like in Deflagration, she sees the rings, she knows he's reconfigured them, does nothing about it. She finds out twice though, in representation because Felix tells her to her face, and in confirmation because she's just in the right place at the right time. Honestly, yeah, I do like the overall plot of the show until season 5. A lot of the decisions until season 5 did make a lot of sense, but then in season 5 we just got random things like Chloe becoming a sadist, Chloe becoming the mayor, and also this.
That Noir has feelings for Marinette Dupan-Chang. I don't know to what extent, but they exist. And they're a weakness that I intend to exploit.
And don't anyone comment, well, Gaby Baby could still do something. The man is deceased. The only power he has with it is if he tells Lila through a Quatagama. And whilst that could be interesting, there's no guarantee she'll get one. And honestly, I think since they ignored it in Elation, I think they probably forgot it happened. So I highly doubt, I would love if they did something with it, but my faith in the writers decreases every day, so I highly doubt they're going to remember now. The subplot of the romance between Adrien and Marinette in the show is fine, but I definitely think it needs some work because I'm not really a fan of how Marinette's anxiety around Adrien is made fun of. It's basically like the majority of the comic relief in the show is from how she acts around him, which I'm not a fan of. Like, the only thing I like about the episode Derision is how her anxiety in that episode was taken seriously. And that's the only thing I like about that episode. The lead up to their relationship, like I said, was very odd, with Adrien really randomly realising how he felt. There wasn't really a trigger we were shown for him to realise it. It just kind of honestly felt very forced, which is unfortunate because I love Adrienette. And now they're together, it's actually quite boring, so I hope they do something a bit more interesting with their relationship next season. As for the movie, again, the same plot. Don't let Hook Daddy win, which he didn't in the movie, amazing, and it has the same subplot of romance. We've already talked about how much I think the romance was in the movie compared to the show, so for the main plot, I think it was great. It was super simple compared to the show, obviously due to the runtime. Compared to the show, they don't have a chance to go off on tangents about how awful of a person Chloe is. And it being simple isn't a bad thing. If in doubt or you're writing something, don't overcomplicate things. Keep everything simple. I think it's fine to keep things simple. And one of my favourite plot development points is that Marinette isn't able to use her Ladybug power until the end of the final battle. It reflects how far she's come as a character. And furthermore, I love that they didn't have the Lucky Charm in the movie. Fun fact, I hate the Lucky Charm with burning passion. It's my least favourite part of every single episode. I hate it. And I've always thought it's weird that she gets 2 powers, the Lucky Charm and the Miraculous Ladybug, and Cat Noir only gets 1, and I just prefer with her power being creation that I feel like it makes sense for her to do the Miraculous Ladybug to repair everything, and Cat Noir destroys stuff with the Cataclysm. To me, they're the opposites of each other, whereas a Lucky Charm is just a bit, what? Plus now we have the Goat Miraculous, which kind of is a Lucky Charm, so it's like, why do we need 2 Lucky Charm Miraculous? Dunno. In my opinion, the only hole in the plot is in the opening of the final song in the movie, which is Reaching Out. The line is, I dreamed of calling Paris home, because if you didn't know, the movie was supposed to start with Marinette moving to France from China, but they took it out and they never mentioned it in the movie again. I forgot to change the lyrics, so she dreams of calling Paris home because she's only just moved there. She was in China before that. But they forgot to change it. I don't think it really alters much, but it's just like a little thing. Overall, in my opinion, the plot of the movie was executed far better since it didn't make random decisions that were out of character for anyone. So I think by now, after all of that, you all know what conclusion I'm going to make, and that is that the movie was better than the show. And don't get me wrong, I love the show, it's my favourite TV show most of the time. But I also critique everything I watch and read, including things I really like. And I'm not afraid to admit when I think people make weird and bad decisions when they write something. I think that's completely fine to do, especially when I'm also a professional writer myself. I would be more than okay if someone wanted to critique my own work like this, and I'd also have zero problem telling Thomas Astruc to his face about where I think he's taken missteps. I think if you're willing to make videos like this, you have to be willing to be able to say it to the person's face. Although I definitely think I'd be wasting my breath because he wouldn't listen at all. So while I prefer the movie, I know it's not perfect, but I do think it's miles better than the show. So there you go, besties, that's my thoughts on it. I've had a few people ask me, and I definitely think it's more than okay to compare things when they're about the same subject matter, even if they do take a different form. Like the amount of people that compare a book and then its film or TV show adaptation. I think that's more than okay to do. I don't get why people object to it so much. I genuinely think the people who object to it are the ones who prefer the show and don't want to admit that the movie is better. But that's just my opinion, maybe it's not a popular one. Of course, I would love to know what you think. Which one do you think was better, the movie or the show? And I will see you in the next one. Bye!